Hi, everyone. Welcome to my talk where I'm going to be talking about the influence of visual information on phonetic representations in Spanish English bilinguals for my second year project. So I think the best way to kickstart this presentation and really get a sense of the foundation of this talk is to raise your hand if you're bilingual. You can go ahead and raise your hand on like the Zoom video or the little option for raise hand, whatever you feel comfortable with. So, did you know that in the US, over 67 million individuals speak more than one language? And this number continues to rise. In recent years, a substantial amount of research has been conducted to understanding how bilingual language processing differs from monolinguals in several different contexts. So by different contexts, I mean studies that have looked at comparing the two groups in terms of language processing when the speech is in noise, at the same tactical level, differences in lexical competition, and so much more. However, not much has actually compared how visual information influences both groups' language perception and the role that of being a bilingual plays also on this influence of visual information. So I think when we think of the influence of visual information, I'm sure many of us are thinking something like the McGurk effect, which I think we all know and have experienced. It's fairly strong. It really emphasizes how visual information can completely alter the auditory signal that we're receiving. It's also been found that individuals who attend to the mouth more actually experience the McGurk effect. So now thinking about what about bilinguals, what work has been done there. So it has been found that mouth movements play a pretty big role in bilinguals. That actually has a strong influence in their second language. It's been found that their comprehension in their second language is actually enhanced by visual information. Um, it's also been found that bilinguals actually will attend to the mouth movements fairly frequently in their second language. We see this data here. This has been taken from a McGurk study from looking at bilinguals and monolinguals by Marianne and colleagues. So we see there's a monolingual group and then an early and late bilingual group. So in these pie charts, the target area is this AV integrated in light gray, which is actually basically saying this is McGurk. This is where they experience at McGurk a fused different percept in this case. And you can see that the bilinguals actually experience this McGurk fused integrated percept a lot more than monolinguals, thus kind of emphasizing that bilinguals that gaze at the mouth more, visual mouth movements play a bigger role for bilinguals than monolinguals. It's also been found that infants raised in a bilingual household already start to gaze more at mouths than a monolingual child. And so, if you know me and my work, I'm interested in Spanish English bilinguals. And this really got me thinking what's the role of visual information on Spanish English bilinguals? Specifically, Spanish English bilinguals, because of the really cool differences between Spanish phonology and English phonology. If you've seen me present before, I'm sure you've seen this slide a couple times by now, but let's go ahead and recap what I'm trying to emphasize. So what's interesting is actually in Spanish phonology, there isn't a sound V. It actually gets mapped onto B instead. Yes, there are some dialects that may speak using this V, but for the most case, V doesn't phonetically really exist. It does orthographically in Spanish, but not in terms of language production for the most part. What actually ends up happening is the V sound maps onto the B sound. And this is really interesting in comparison to English because in English, we know that B and V are two separate sounds. We make clear distinctions between them. And so this is why a lot of native Spanish speakers replace that V sound with a B when speaking in English. So a word like volleyball becomes volleyball. This kind of raises questions such as, what's the role of age of acquisition when you learn Spanish, when you learn English, on these representations, on this understanding between B and V? What about heritage speakers? So in this case, individuals who are raised in America where we speak English, but they were raised in a Spanish speaking household. And so this kind of leads into my research questions on how distinct are Spanish English bilinguals representations between the phonemes B and V? How does visual information impact the precision of these representations of B and V? And lastly, how does language experience and age of acquisition influence Spanish English bilinguals' representational precision between B and V? So quickly, some hypotheses, like very brief and vague and broad. First being that Spanish English bilinguals will be more influenced by visual mouth movements and speech perception than monolinguals when given a task to state what they perceive. So this means that they will be, since they're looking at the mouth movements more, they are going to be more swayed, more influenced by what the mouth is saying and producing in terms of their perception compared to monolingual, who may refer more to the auditory cue only. And in addition, I expect that individual with the stronger Spanish background, so maybe they've spoken Spanish for a longer time, maybe they were raised in a Spanish-speaking country, maybe they learned English later in life. These individuals will perceive B or ba in this task more often because of that V mapping onto B not really existing in Spanish. So the task and design is fairly simple. So we've recruited students off of SONA. These are college students. We pre-screened to have Spanish English bilinguals and English monolinguals participate. This was an online study, and unfortunately, I would have preferred to have done this in person, but this was done online. So there are two blocks. There was an audio-visual block and then an auditory only. Of course, these would be counterbalanced across all the participants pool we have. And so I had 20 stimuli, which I will discuss what those were, with 10 repetitions for 200 trials per block. And participants were simply asked to just type out what they heard. So the stimuli I used were very similar to my first year project, where I have a manipulated recording of someone producing va with a V, and then those were paired with mouth movements that were either making a ba or a va sound. So a bit more on my stimuli. So you can see here, this is a time amplitude plot of someone saying va, and that little red window that's been highlighted and zoomed in is actually the fricative portion, the v part of the va. And so I found that if you change the amplitude or the duration of this little window, the sound actually slowly starts to shift more towards the B-like sound. And so I took advantage of this and I made 5 amplitude variations or changes where I decreased by -9 decibels each time to create this va to ba spectrum. And I did that again with the va audio, where I then instead took the duration off. So a little bit of that time window was chopped off, again, creating 5 different versions, making a va to ba spectrum. That's 10 stimuli. So these manipulations would help us to see the threshold at which a participant starts to perceive ba. And then these were paired with visual ba or visual va. So that's 10 stimuli times 2 types of videos for 20 different stimuli, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and play what those sound like right now. Let's go ahead. So this is going to be when there's no change. This is the pure va.
Va,
Okay. Next is going to be, this is an amplitude change. This is going to be the -18 decibels. So this is kind of right in the middle. That's step 3. Hopefully the most ambiguous sounding to you.
va,
And then last being the -36, which should be the most ba.
ba,
Yeah. So I'm going to quickly show a trial example and kind of like a test on what you maybe perceive. So this is that ambiguous sound of -18 decibels. Again, this is just an amplitude example I used, paired with a visual va. So I'm going to go ahead and play that.
va,
So I personally hear a va, even though the sound is ambiguous. And this is compared to the same exact auditory file, but now with ba video.
va,
I hear ba this time. I don't know. So, but that just kind of shows like how important that visual information is in kind of altering our perception. So after participants receive something of that sort, they then are asked to type out their response, which you can see. This is, again, like I said, this was done online. Um, this is what the audiovisual block would look like. There was an auditory only block as well, which was exactly the same stimuli, same repetitions, but the only difference was that they didn't see the visual map movements, they just saw a static image. So kind of like what you can see right now, the video looks when it's not playing, that's what they saw, just the mouth. And again, exactly the same task. So I have some preliminary results that we can kind of discuss. It's kind of hard to do because there's very little participants. So up top, we have the bilingual group, which was only 4 participants I got, and the bottom three being the monolinguals, which is only 3. So first we have the x-axis is representing the steps from 1 to 5, step 1 being va and step 5 being ba. So from left to right, it's going from va to ba. And then the y-axis is the percept. So here we just chose B, V responses, and then F responses because we saw some people were perceiving F, and then other for anything else that they may have heard. Yeah, so we can first go ahead and look at the auditory only conditions across the bilinguals and the monolinguals. So we can see already that the monolinguals are perceiving va way more than the bilinguals when it's pure va. So already to begin with, they're perceiving the bilinguals ba more than va. And then you can see this change as the sound slowly turns more into ba. You see an increase in ba responses up here, and the same is going for the monolinguals. Then we can look at the AV conditions. So this is audiovisual va, which means they saw va video, and then this is where they saw ba video. And so these highlighted boxes are what we would say that they perceived at McGurk, which means that they perceived what the visual mouth movement was showing. So for example, in audiovisual va, when visual va is presented, yet the auditory signal is ba or more ba-like, this window is the McGurk effect where they actually perceived va, even though the auditory was ba, but the visual was va. And then the same case here for the video ba, where more va-like auditory signal, but paired with visual ba and perceived ba. So that's just been highlighted to kind of show that McGurk effect. We can see also that compared to auditory only, that the bilinguals here are actually, they are having that visual information is influencing. You can see that they have an increase in VAR responses than when it was just auditory only. And, compared to the monolinguals, not so much because they were already perceiving the VAR from the start, but you can see that's clear here and very clear as well in both monolinguals and bilinguals when visual ba was presented, they hear ba more even though it's presented ba. Yeah, so like I said, the data is still kind of being collected. There's not a lot, but these are some of the small conclusions we can make. So some are kind of what our hypotheses suggested. The bilinguals perceiving ba more, being somewhat more influenced also by the visual mouth movements. So in conclusion, like I said, but next steps, we need obviously more data. Once I have more data, I'd also really like to look at the importance of language background in terms of HL acquisition, proficiency, experience in the languages, to really kind of maybe see if that's playing a role, because that was one of my questions. But yeah, so there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Not entirely sure, if the data that I have at the moment is accurate. So But yes, thank you so much for listening to my talk.